and make straight paths for your feet, so that the limb which is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. The first part of this exhortation concerns the inward frame of the minds of men, with respect to themselves and their own souls. That which follows, verse 13, looks to their ways, walking in conversation with respect to others, that they may receive no damage but benefit by it. And therefore the apostle does not in this direct us to strengthen our feet, as he does our hands and knees, but to make straight paths for them, wherein we may walk. And the conjunctive, kai, denotes an additional duty. There are two things in the words. First, a duty prescribed. Secondly, an enforcement of it from an evil consequent of its omission, both in terms metaphorical. Our feet are those members of our body which carry us on in our course, which is the ability and activity of our minds for spiritual duties. These feet must have a path to walk in, or they can make no progress, according as that path is right and straight, or crooked and uneven. So will our course be. It is therefore highly incumbent on us to look well to the paths in which we are going, and this is here prescribed to us. The direction seems to be taken from Proverbs 4, verse 26. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Or rather, all thy ways shall be ordered aright, which is the sense of this place. In order to a discovery of the duty here prescribed, we must consider, number 1, what are the paths of our feet? Number 2, how we are to make them straight. Our paths is a will, the mark made by wills or bits. So though it be taken for a path, yet it is such a path as is marked out for others, that leaves a track in which we may be followed. The vulgar renders it by our steps, but it is rather the way in which we tread which is said to be made straight. Our obedience to God is called our walking before him, namely, all that obedience which he requires in the covenant, Genesis 17:1. The first divine testimony given to man was to his faith in sacrifice, Genesis 4:4. That is, as expressed with respect to the atonement to be made by Christ. And the second was to obedience under the name of walking with God. Enoch walked with God, Genesis 5:24. In these two, thus exemplified from the beginning, faith and obedience, does the life of God in the church consist. As this obedience is called our walking, so it is called our path. And these paths are distinguished into the paths of the righteous and the upright, and the paths of the wicked and the froward. That is, everyone's course of actions with respect to God and his will is his path. And this is called our path, first, because it is that in which we are continually conversant. Secondly, because it is that in which we tend to the end which we aim at, and that which will certainly bring us there. Thirdly, because all the circumstances of our observation of a path and walking in it illustrate the way and manner of our obedience and duties of it, as might be declared. This path of our obedience may be considered either objectively only, and so it is nothing but the will of God revealed to us, the canon or rule which we are to walk according to, that we may have peace, Galatians 6, verse 16. And in this sense, the path of all men is one and the same, absolutely invariable. Nor can we make it straight or crooked. It is absolutely and perfectly straight in itself. Or it may be considered with respect to them that walk in it, and so there are degrees of its straightness. Men may continue in it, yet fall variously as to its universal rectitude. They may fail in it, though they do not utterly leave it, or fall from it. So it is affirmed of Peter and those with him, when they failed in a matter of compliance with the Jews, that they did not walk with a right foot. They continued in the path of the truth of the gospel, but they stumbled in it. They warped in one instance from it. And by this we may understand what is here enjoined in a way of duty, namely, to make these paths straight. For there are two things in this. Number one, that we walk uprightly in the paths of obedience. Then are our paths straight when we walk uprightly in the paths of God. And as this respects our universal obedience, as it does everywhere in the Scripture, so I do not doubt but regard as had to halting, or taking some crooked steps in profession during trial, deserting of church assemblies, forbearance of a number of necessary duties that might be provocations to their adversaries, irregular compliance with the Jews in their worship, are things that the apostle intimates them to have been liable to. Where these things were, though they forsook not utterly the path of the gospel, yet they walked not in it with a right foot. They failed in the way, though they fell not from it. These things the apostle would have rectified. Secondly, that we walk visibly in these paths. This is included both in the signification of the word and in the precept to make our path straight, to wit, that they may be seen and known so to be. For this is necessary to the end proposed, namely, the preservation of others from being turned out of the way, or their recovery from their wandering. And therefore I grant that the duties especially intended in this precept are courage, resolution, constancy in profession, with a diligent watch against all crooked compliances, or fearful relinquishment of duties. And therefore, observation 1, it is our duty not only to be found in the ways of God in general, but to take care that we walk carefully, circumspectly, uprightly, and diligently in them. On this depends our own peace, and all our usefulness towards others. It is a sad thing when some men's walk in the ways of God shall deter others from them, or turn them out of the way. Yet so it falls out in the negligent, careless profession of many. Observation 2. To make halts or balks in our way of profession, or crooked paths and neglect of duty or compliances with the world, in time of trial and persecution, is an evidence of an evil frame of heart and of a dangerous state or condition. The enforcement of the duty required is the next thing in this verse. Lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. The apostle continues in the use of metaphors, according as he began this discourse. And having described our careful obedience by making straight paths for our feet, he calls that or those which are defective therein lame. That which is lame, the Vulgate reads the words, that no man halting without any good sense. The Syriac, that the members which are lame, the principal internal hindrance from walking, is lameness. He that is lame can make but slow progress, and is often ready by his halting to stumble out of the way. Lameness, therefore, is some defect that is distinguished from external hindrances, and from mere fainting or weariness, and which the apostle had spoken before, which may befall them that are not lame, which obstructs men in their progress and makes them to be easily turned out of the way. Besides, it includes an inward disease and distemper in particular. Whence the apostle says, it is to be healed. And by the way, we may observe that a number of diseases, weaknesses, and lamenesses are apt to fall out in the flock of God. These he promises himself to be tender toward and to heal, Zechariah 11, verses 15 and 16. As he severely threatens those shepherds by whom they are neglected, Ezekiel 34:4, and so on. Considering what at this time was the state of the Hebrews who had received the doctrine of the gospel, as both this epistle and the story of them in the Acts of the Apostles declare, as also what fell outwards among them, I judge that by this, that which is lame, the apostle peculiarly intends those that would retain the Judaical ceremonies and worship together with the doctrines of the gospel. For by this they were made weak and infirm in their profession, as being defective in light, resolution, and steadiness, as also seemed a halt between two opinions, as the Israelites of old between Jehovah and Baal. This is that which was lame at the time among these Hebrews, and it may be by analogy extended to all those who are under the power of such vicious habits, inclinations, or neglects as weaken and hinder men in their spiritual progress. The caution concerning this sort of persons is that they be not turned out of the way. To be turned out of the way is to be turned off from the profession of the gospel. Those who were lame, as before described, were very liable and subject to. A small matter would turn them aside, as afterwards many of them were turned off from the truth. The apostle does not therein declare a displeasure against them. He is not angry with them, but advises others to deal carefully and tenderly with them, avoiding everything that might give occasion to their turning aside. And this the apostle extends to their healing, but rather let it be healed. To be healed is not opposed to be turned aside, as though the word should signify a further breach or luxation of that which is lame, but it denotes the cure of him that is lame by a continuation of the same metaphor. Be so far from doing or omitting anything which might give them occasion to turn from the way, as that you endeavor the removal of those causes of lameness which you see in them, and the sense of the words may be included in the ensuing observations. Number 3, a hesitation or doubtfulness in or about important doctrines of truth will make men lame, weak, and infirm in their profession. And number 4, those who are so are disposed to a total defection from the truth, and are ready on all occasions to go out of the way. Observation 5. Every vicious habit of mind, every defect in light or neglect of duty, every lack of stirring up grace to exercise will make men lame and halt in profession, and easy to be turned aside with difficulties and oppositions. Observation 6. When we see persons in such a state, it is our duty to be very careful so to behave ourselves as not to give any occasion to their further miscarriages, but rather to endeavor their healing. 7. The best way in which this may be done is by making visible and plain to them our own faith, resolution, courage, and constancy, in a way of obedience becoming the gospel. By this we shall both excite, promote, and direct them in and to their duty. For observation 8, the negligent walking of those professors who are sound in the faith, their weakness and pusillanimity in times of trial, their lack of making straight paths for their feet and visible holiness, are a great means of turning aside those that are lame, weak, and halting. Observation 9. It is good to deal with and endeavor the healing of such lame halters whilst they are yet in the way. When they are quite turned out, their recovery will be difficult, if not impossible.